Hello, ascended masters, ignorant peasants, wretched demons, beautiful angels, powerful dragons, ecstatic fairies, screeching harpies, and smarmy goblins alike. Welcome to my mystery school / YouTube channel. Today I have a really fun and engaging topic to talk about in the context of the fate of the Earth, which I'm sure you will be ever so excited and delighted to listen attentively to and possibly take notes about because you care about the fate of all souls and you are willing to fight for the freedom and evolution of human consciousness because that's basically one of the most important things in the universe. So, without further ado, one of the greatest threats to the fate of the future of humanity is the psychological imposition of false or inverted senses of virtue. When you can convince someone that they have absolute moral authority on a certain topic, they will be eager to condemn anyone who disagrees with them, with psychological and sometimes even physical violence. It is therefore the logical motivation of those who seek to control the destiny of mankind for their own malicious gain to impose these false virtues on others, which means that it is very important that we consciously examine the way that this occurs and what we can do to fight back against such deception and ensure that our sense of virtue is beneficial to the fate of the world and based in truth. It is our sense of virtue which determines our motivations, and it is our motivations which determine the actions that define the world. We might not always consciously recognize what our sense of virtue is, especially when malicious inversions are subliminally imposed upon us. But if we don't consciously recognize our own sense of virtue, then it means that we don't recognize our own source of motivation for our actions, which can, of course, be very dangerous. I will now exit generality and enter specificity. This sense of false virtue can be easily observed, particularly in America, where the Democrat-Republican dichotomy has many convinced that their side is fighting for absolute good, while the opposing side is fighting for absolute evil. Now, even if that was true, obviously the absolute evil side would not reveal which side they were. Obviously, reality is a bit more nuanced than that, and there are many good people who adhere to each side of this divide for a myriad of reasons. So, how do we reconcile this? What is the actual determining factor of objective moral superiority? As I have mentioned in a previous video, which you are free to examine, the metric upon which I gauge true evil involves analyzing the degree to which an action or an intent causes or would cause non-consensual harm against innocents. The factors involved, therefore, are the degree of non-consent, the degree of harm, and the degree of innocence. Whenever we believe that we hold a virtue or a moral authority over someone else, we should deeply look at each of those relative factors. How much is their belief actually causing harm? And is it causing harm to innocents who do not consent? Well, we do have the right and moral obligation to oppose those who would cause unjust harm to others. We must be very discerning to be assured that we are not hypocrites as we seek to enact justice against those who may have done no wrong, or perhaps have only done wrong through ignorance rather than maliciousness. If we do not think about such things, then we will fall victim to the deceptions of false moral imperatives, and we will be led to cause senseless harm to one another. So in the context of Democrats and Republicans, many have been led to believe that the opposite party is automatically causing non-consensual harm against innocent people and thus merits destruction. However, if that belief is misguided and the people who they believe to be causing harm are actually good and trying to improve the world, then the act of harming them is ironically causing harm against innocent people. So we all really need to ask ourselves, how exactly are the people who we believe to be our enemies truly harming or threatening innocence, which merits our righteous actions against them? If we don't have a rational metric of how they are truly threatening innocence, and we are threatening them with spiritual or physical violence, then we might actually be hypocritical and morally inferior. I think if both Democrats and Republicans really analyzed that, they'd realize that their true enemies are actually a much smaller minority of prolific deceivers who are responsible for hypnotizing and leading many people astray, and that most people are simply trying to do what is best for the world from their limited perspective of right and wrong. Now, the Democrat-Republican divide is of course not the only false virtue which leads people to be destructive towards one another. Some people see having money as a virtue, and therefore they see those who do not have money as non-virtuous and seek to condemn the poor. Some people see abnormal sexuality as a virtue and thus seek to condemn people who have more normal sexual preferences. That's obviously very rare, but it does happen, and it's obviously an inversion of a sense of virtue. Some people see the act of thinking about conspiracies as a sort of sin and thus seek to condemn and ostracize anyone who thinks about what they would consider a conspiracy. And that's sort of the other side of the coin as far as believing in false virtues is believing in false sins. Some people see their own abnormality as a sort of sin, while conformity is a virtue, and thus they torture themselves and able to act more normal. Some people perceive atheism as a virtue and seek to condemn anyone who believes in God. Some people see meat eating as a virtue and seek to condemn anyone who does not eat meat. Some people see beauty as a virtue and thus idolize the beautiful and condemn those they deem ugly without knowing anything about their character or motivation. Some people see destruction itself as a virtue and wish to condemn anyone who inhibits destruction. That's a bit more of an exaggerated case, though. There are a profound number of false virtues which people adhere to, and more are created daily in the continuous effort to misdirect the motivations and actions of humanity and bend us towards our own self-destruction and bondage. So I will reiterate that it is profoundly important that people work to consciously examine the rationality of their sense of virtue and their desire to condemn one another. If you are inclined to condemn others, it should be based upon more than simply trusting the opinion of someone, especially someone on TV, who implied, even repeatedly, that it was good for you to condemn them. If you want to condemn someone, you had damn well better be able to explain perfectly how and why your perception is so vastly morally superior to theirs, and how they are threatening innocent people, or else there is a very good chance that you are not actually morally superior.